Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fearless Floyd Show. As always, I am your host, Fearless Floyd. Today, we have back former NSA whistleblower, former Man in Black, former 13th member of Majestic 12, Noel Benoist. Today, we are covering the Marilyn Monroe story. Without further ado, I'm just going to dive right in. And we're going over to Wikipedia, give you a little historical background on the blonde bombshell, Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe, born Norma Jean Mortensen, June 1st, 1926, and deceased August 4th, 1962, was an American actress and model, known for playing comic blonde bombshell characters. She became one of the most popular sex symbols of the 1950s and early 1960s, as well as an emblem of the era's sexual revolution. She was a top-billed actress for a decade, and her films grossed $200 million, equivalent to $2 billion in 2023, by the time of her death in 1962. Born and raised in Los Angeles County, Monroe spent most of her childhood in a total of 12 foster homes and an orphanage before marrying James Doherty at the age of 16. She worked in a factory. She was working in a factory during World War II when she met a photographer from the First Motion Picture Unit and began a successful pinup modeling career, which led to two short-lived film contracts with 20th Century Fox and Columbia Pictures. After a series of minor roles, she signed a new contract with Fox in late 1950. Over the next 2 years, she became a popular actress with roles in several comedies, including As Young as You Feel and Monkey Business, and in the dramas Clash by Night and Don't Bother to Knock. Monroe faced a scandal when it was revealed that she had posed for nude photographs prior to becoming a star, but the story did not damage her career and instead resulted in increased interest in her films. By 1953, Monroe was one of the most marketable Hollywood stars. She had leading roles in the film noir Niagara, which overtly relied on her sex appeal, in the comedies Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and How to Marry a Millionaire, which established her star image as a dumb blonde. The same year, her nude images were used as the centerfold in the cover of the first issue of Playboy. Monroe played a significant role in the creation and management of her public image throughout her career, but felt disappointed when typecast and underpaid by the studio. She was briefly suspended in 1954 for refusing a film project, but returned to star in The 7-Year Itch, 1955, one of the biggest box office successes of her career. When the studio was still reluctant to change Monroe's contract, she founded her own film production company in 1954 with her good friend, photographer Milton Green. She dedicated 1955 to building the company and began studying method acting under Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio. Later that year, Fox awarded her a new contract, which gave her more control and a larger salary. Her subsequent roles included a critically acclaimed performance in Bus Stop, 1956, and her first independent production in The Prince and the Showgirl, 1957. She won a Golden Globe for Best Actress and for her role in Some Like It Hot, 1959, a critical and commercial success. Her last completed film was the drama The Misfits in 1961. Monroe's troubled life received much attention. Her marriages to retired baseball star Joe DiMaggio and to playwright Arthur Miller were highly publicized, and both ended in divorce. On August 4th, 1962, Marilyn Monroe died at age 36 of an overdose of barbiturates at her Los Angeles home. Her death was ruled a probable suicide. Long after her death, Monroe remains a pop culture icon, with the American Film Institute ranking her as the sixth greatest female screen legend from the golden age of Hollywood. (1926 to 1943), childhood and first marriage. Monroe was born Norma Jean Mortensen at Los Angeles General Hospital on June 1st, 1926. Her mother, Gladys Pearl Baker, née Monroe, was born in Piedras Negras, Coahuila, Mexico, to a poor Midwestern family who migrated to California at the turn of the century. At age 15, Gladys had married John Newton Baker, an abusive man 9 years her senior. They had two children together, Robert and Bernice. She successfully filed for divorce and sole custody of her two oldest in 1923. But Baker kidnapped the children soon after and moved with them to his native Kentucky. Monroe was not told that she had a sister until she was 12, and then they met for the first time in 1944 when Monroe was 17 or 18. Following the divorce, Gladys worked as a film negative cutter at Consolidated Film Industries. Her second marriage occurred in 1924 when she married Martin Edward Mortensen, but they separated just months later and divorced in 1928. In 2022, DNA testing indicated that Monroe's father was Charles Stanley Gifford, a co-worker of Gladys, with whom she had an affair in 1925, though until then, her father was thought to be Mortensen. Monroe had two other half-siblings from Gifford's marriage with his first wife, a sister, Doris Elizabeth, and a brother, Charles Stanley. That's news. Although Gladys was mentally and financially unprepared for a child, Monroe's early childhood was stable and happy. Gladys placed her daughter with evangelical Christian foster parents Albert and Ida Bolander in the suburban town of Hawthorne. She also lived there for 6 months until she was forced to move back to the city for employment. She then began visiting her daughter on weekends. In the summer of 1933, Gladys bought a small house in Hollywood with a loan from the Homeowners Loan Corporation and moved 7-year-old Monroe in with her. They shared the house with lodgers, actors George and Maud Atkinson, and their daughter Nellie. In January 1934, Gladys had a mental breakdown and was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. After several months in a rest home, she was committed to the Metropolitan State Hospital. She spent the rest of her life in and out of hospitals and was rarely in contact with Monroe. Monroe became a ward of the state, and her mother's friend, Grace Goddard, took responsibility over her and her mother's affairs. For the next 16 months, Monroe continued living with the Atkinsons and may have been sexually abused during this time. Always a shy girl, she developed a stutter and became withdrawn. In the summer of 1935, she briefly stayed with Grace and her husband, Erwin Doc Goddard, and two other families. In September 1935, Grace placed her in a Los Angeles Orphans Home No. 2, Holly Grove. The orphanage was a model institution and was described in positive terms by her peers, but Monroe felt abandoned. Encouraged by the orphanage staff, who thought that Monroe would be happier living in a family, Grace became her legal guardian in 1936, but did not take her out of the orphanage until the summer of 1937. Monroe's second stay with the Goddards lasted only a few months because Doc allegedly molested her. Though these claims are disputed, she then lived for brief periods with her relatives and Grace's friends and relatives in Los Angeles and Compton. And this is a picture of her right here at age 16 with her first husband. That lasted 4 years, so you can see she was already a knockout. Monroe's childhood experiences first made her want to become an actress. And I guess I'm quoting, "I didn't like the world around me because it was kind of grim. When I heard that this was acting, I said, that's what I want to be. Some of my foster families used to send me to the movies to get me out of the house, and there I'd sit all day and way into the night, up in front, there with the screen so big, a little kid all alone, and I loved it. Monroe found a more permanent home in September 1938 when she began living with Grace's aunt, Anna Lower, in Sawtell. Monroe was enrolled at Emerson Junior High School and went to weekly Christian Science services with Lower. She excelled in writing and contributed to the school newspaper, but was otherwise a mediocre student. Owing to the elderly Lower's health problems, Monroe returned to live with the Goddards in Van Nuys in about early 1941. That same year, she began attending Van Nuys High School, where she met factory worker James Doherty, 5 years her senior. At the age of 15, she began dating him. Monroe had been harboring a crush on Doherty, who had been class president and football captain during his days at school. In 1942, the company that employed Doc Goddard relocated him to West Virginia. California child protection laws prevented the Goddards from taking Monroe out of state, and she faced having to return to the orphanage. To prevent this, Grace Goddard approached Doherty's mother, Ethel, with the proposition that Doherty marry Monroe. Ethel agreed, and the two told Monroe and Doherty their idea. Both were rather skeptical. Doherty thought Monroe was rather young to marry, and Monroe was nervous. On one occasion, Monroe approached Grace with the idea that they marry as friends instead of consummating their marriage, but Grace replied, "Don't worry, you'll learn." Monroe married Doherty on June 19, 1942, just after her 16th birthday at the home of family friends named the Howells. Though neither the Goddards or Monroe's mother attended the wedding, the Bollanders and their daughter Nancy were in attendance. I remember the winding staircase in the living room and all of us just staring at the top of the stairs until she appeared, Nancy later recalled. What a beautiful bride. Monroe subsequently dropped out of high school and became a housewife. After the wedding, they honeymooned at a lake in Ventura County, California, then moved to a studio apartment in Sherman Oaks, Los Angeles, where they lived a calm, idyllic life. Doherty later recalled that despite the circumstances they married under, he and Monroe loved each other madly, and that being married was like being on a honeymoon for a year. However, according to biographer Donald Spoto, Monroe found herself and Doherty mismatched and later said that she was dying of boredom during the marriage. The first problems in their marriage appeared in late 1943 when Monroe and Doherty attended a dance at the Catalina Casino Ballroom. That night, Monroe was a popular dancing partner, while Doherty was relatively ignored. Jealous, he told her that they were leaving. When Monroe told him she might go back to the dance alone, he told her that she would not be allowed to come home if she did. In 1943, Doherty enlisted in the Merchant Marine and was stationed on Santa Catalina Island, where Monroe moved with him. Here's another picture of her from 1945 as a redhead. Looks like she's doing a still photography for a prop company or a motor company. Here's another images of her pinup. Another image from 1948. Here's a still from the Asphalt Jungle. Another still from Clash by Night. Another still from 1952, Don't Bother to Knock. And Monroe in Niagara, 1953, in which she dwelt on her sex appeal. Monroe performing the song Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend in the trailer for the 1953 film Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. Monroe with Betty Grable and Lauren Bacall in the film How to Marry a Millionaire. 1953, 1954 and 55. Obviously, she married Joe DiMaggio. Jolton Joe DiMaggio. That failed. And here she is posing for the 7-year itch, probably one of the most iconic photographs in the history of the world. And here she is at Actor Studios at Lee Strasberg's, 1955. Another still from Bus Stop, 1956. Another still at her wedding with Arthur Miller in 1956. Monroe with Laurence Olivier in a publicity photo for Prince and the Showgirl from 1957. And here's a still from Some Like It Hot with Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis, probably one of the most popular movies that she ever did, from 1959. Here's another still with Monroe, Estelle Winwood, Eli Wallach, Montgomery Clift, and Clark Gable in The Misfits, her last movie, from 1961. And here she is on the set of Something's Got to Give in May of 1962, a mere 3 or 4 months before her death. You know what they say, die young, stay pretty. And she obviously emulates that. Here's one of her last photographs by George Barris, 23 days before her death in July of 1962. And here is the set of Exterminating Angel from 1962, right before her death as well. And, here's everything about her suicide, funeral. Another one from the 7-year itch. Here's some of the advertising that she did for Luster Cream Shampoo. The movies that she made, which was, most people don't know that she was in a lot of movies. And one in the shoot. This is a very iconic image. Andy Warhol has done her as well. As we scroll through here, and here's all the notes to back up everything, and the footnotes as well. That's your introduction to Marilyn Monroe. My backdrop's dropping there. All right, I'm going to pause while I get Noel on the right track. He's lost as usual. When you're dealing with older folks who are not really technical savvy, you have to hang in there. So I'll be right back. All right, I've got all the technicalities out of the way with Noel. He is backstage, and I'm ready to bring him on. And he's going to spill the beans on all his information and intel and experiences that he has had during his tenure in intelligence regarding Marilyn Monroe. And without further ado, Noel, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here again.
Absolutely. All right. Well, tell us all about Marilyn Monroe.
Well, and most of what I know there, basically, I knew Kennedy's, and I knew the relationship of Kennedy with Marilyn Monroe, and a lot of smear and fear used against her and against John and Robert. But in actuality, basically, Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley were both recruited to work for Intel and for the law enforcement and stuff in getting information on the mob. And for the Kennedys, they wanted information not only on the mob, but on the mob relationship with any government agents, because they had already received intel that let them know that MJ12 had used the mob for enforcement more than once. And matter of fact, actually, MJ12 orchestrated Kennedy's death with some of the mob members in that, but they hired basically kind of a private contractor from France for the actual shooter, Lucien Sardy. But when basically Kennedy's are kind of where I got the idea, Kennedy and the good Lord in prayer, Kennedy's would move toward doing things, exposing relationships and that with mob connections, mob and intel connections, and then they would back off and let the mob think that they were satisfied or whatever, get the mob and the MJ12 people to relax, and then they would go at it again. And actually, Jacqueline was a really good advisor and confidant with John Kennedy. And so when things got going and MJ12 was trying to smear Kennedy a little bit because they picked up on the fact that he was looking at putting an end to MJ12 and that he wanted to propose the world partnership for space race or space exploration, then they were already wanting to find ways to get him out of the way. And their primary way was going to be basically inferring that he and Marilyn had an affair. And of course, they used that type of thing against Bill Clinton. Clinton actually did some stuff that I asked him to do. And they knew where his weakness was, and that's why they set him up. Unfortunately, he went for it. And so with him, they had real scandal stuff to work with. But with John Kennedy, they didn't. However, it got pretty hot and heavy, and Jacqueline did not like the appearance of it because Jacqueline prized their marriage, and so did John. And she prized the family. That was the one thing that she absolutely wanted government to stay away from, was their marriage and the family. And so when they started making inferences that Marilyn and John had a relationship and all of this other stuff, then she was getting upset. So John told Marilyn to kind of take a little break, and he told her he was going to basically have her start dealing with Bobby in order to kill some of the rumors about their relationship and in order to appease his wife. And he let her know that, his marriage was one thing that he did not want to risk. And so then the transition finally happened between Marilyn and Robert. And he told her, Robert is the attorney general anyway, so he should be on it. And that they would have some meetings with all of them once in a while. But those would be basically in a way that people would know there was nothing going on. And of course, the mob wanted to believe that she was going to bed with him and everything, because then they could trust her information more. So there were stories put out that were primarily to make the entire undercover operation work. And there were stories put out by MJ12 that were then to try and push that farther into the destruction of the Kennedy family, because they thought Kennedy was going to basically appoint more MJ12 people in positions of authority and everything, and they would be able to have more power in government Whereas when Kennedy got word of what was going on and found intelligence of what was going on, instead of appointing more, he got rid of some of their people and cut off some of those lines of communication. And he made one big mistake, which is the big mistake DC makes so often. Before he went to Dallas, he spoke at a college or a university. And he mentioned MJ12 and the group, and that he was going to be rearranging things. Big mistake. With people like MJ12, you don't broadcast where you're going to hit them, and you don't even really broadcast that you're going to hit them. And I did the same thing as far as getting information, and I would back up every once in a while, and I would make statements like, I quit, I give up. And I even planted a seed that they're stupid for fighting me. What they should have done was granted my benefits from the get-go, and I wouldn't be as angry at them as I am. And then maybe I'd take my money and go off somewhere and just enjoy the rest of my life. And they finally gave up, and I think in part decided to use that suggestion, seed planted long ago. But with Marilyn, when they wanted to take another break and they said, hey, we need to chill and just let everything die down, he wanted to kind of let it die down and get reelected and then get going again after the election. Well, when all of a sudden there was no meetings between her and Bobby or Robert, and no meetings between her and John, she got into some drugs a little bit, and she became really paranoid. And everybody knew she was famous. So, I mean, she could get a press conference in a heartbeat. So she was going to have a press conference and expose everything to the press. Well, John didn't want that, and Bobby didn't want that. And they let her know that if she keeps pushing that realm, that they cannot protect her and that they will not protect her. If she basically was bringing on her own self what she was afraid was happening would happen, but she would bring it on herself, and they were trying to get her to chill and calm down. And instead of doing that, basically, she did take a few more meds and some more sleeping pills. However, the overdose was not something she took voluntarily. She may well have had too many sleeping pills in her, and so somebody went in and gave her a shot that ended up being the overdose. But she could not have really. She couldn't even enjoy sex at all. Sex for her was extremely painful and very bloody. And that's one of the reasons she left her first husband. She didn't feel like she was a good wife to him. And she decided that she was going to get her love by having people love her, by being an entertainer. Because not being able to have sex without it being super painful, in a lot of ways, she didn't really feel loved either. But when people loved her and crowds loved her, she loved that. That kind of was her fulfillment of feeling loved. But Jesse Helm, toward the end of that whole thing, was the Senate hearing committee and dealing with intelligence. And when she was at a resort type, country club type thing or whatever at I think it was one of the big hotels in DC, Jesse Helm went in to see her and basically told her, she was going to have sex with him or he would destroy her and her husband, etc. And so he more or less forced her to have sex with him. And the maids went in and they really expected to find a body. There was so much blood. They said there was so much blood in the bathtub and the bathroom and on the bed and everything that they couldn't see how somebody could bleed that much and not have a body somewhere. And I think they even did an interview with one outfit at one point in time. So people should be able to find their interview about all the blood. So all of the stuff with the affairs with her and John Kennedy and her and Robert, all of that comes from either seeds planted by MJ12 or from agents of MJ12. And MJ12, for a long time, they built in news media and in other areas, basically disinformation and misinformation groups, including in the scientific community and the industrial community, so that they could basically what they call FUPA, anything they did not want people to believe. And they forced the acceptance of the Warren Commission. And most of your experts, I think 99% of your experts, never accepted all of the garbage of the Warren Commission. And the thing is, I told people a long time ago the shooter was behind the fence was Lucian Sardee, and Marilyn knew a lot of that stuff being set up, etc. And the reason she did what she did, and they used her that way, is because mobsters and even MJ12 people love being around Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley. And what they didn't know is Marilyn Monroe was far from being a dumb blonde. First, she was a brunette, not blonde. She bleached her hair blonde. And secondly, she and Elvis were a lot like me. I flunked the language aptitude test for the written exam. And I read slow, but I retain what I read when I do read. But my fastest and most complete learning is audio-visual. So I could basically have a meeting with people. Matter of fact, I did this one time with Sears with a boat, and I can still relate that. That was 1974, and I had a boat that I bought that was supposed to be the boat that has the foam in it, so you could cut it in half and it would still float. And I was going to take it out fishing in the Bay Area, and the waves can get pretty hefty there. And I told them they delivered the wrong boat, and they picked up the wrong boat and delivered the same wrong boat. And I told them, you delivered the same wrong boat. And I described the boat that I was looking for and that they've got the skews wrong or something. And so the second boat ended up getting stolen. And the day after it got stolen, they show up with a truck to pick up the second boat. Well, then they wanted me to pay for the boat. And I told them, that's your problem. That's your neglect and all the way through, you guys messed up. A day after it gets stolen, you come when I've been trying to get you guys to pick it up for like 3 months or more. So we had a meeting with upstairs, and the store manager was on my left behind the desk, and he had kind of just a plain blue dress shirt type on. And then they might have been an attorney or whatever, and he had more of a plaid setup on like I have on. He was in another chair. And I described the scene. I described what every person said, because in that meeting, they agreed that they were going to go ahead and wipe the charge out. I owed them nothing. It was their fault. And about 2, 3, 4 weeks later, I get a letter from the main headquarters, and they're going after me. They're going to give it to a collection outfit. Well, I called that manager and I told him everything said in that meeting, and I was so accurate that he said, I don't know if you're recording this or not, but I do seem to remember that is the way it went. So I was accurate enough that he actually thought I recorded. Well, I did record, but I recorded up here, audio visual. And that's one of the things that MJ12 loved about me, because I would go on missions. We would plant troop sensors on the trails, and we would sneak up like in the prisoner of war camp or one of their staging areas for the Vietnam and that. And we'd come back and I could describe to them how many trucks were there, how many troops were there, the positions of everything, and the whole works. I could give them basically a verbal painting of everything. In fact, one of the missions I still remember today, we came back on, and basically we were doing a prisoner of war count, and so the guys made out like they were attacking the camp, and whenever they attacked or made out like they attacked, and the Viet Cong thought they were being attacked, they would run the prisoners across the compound into this pit, and they had barrels of diesel ready to flip over into the pit. And they even had a couple of barrels they could put gas in if they wanted to. And then they would have a trail of diesel or gas, light it, and they would basically burn the prisoners. So any prisoners that came out would be severely injured, etc. And so we did that number, and then we had to meet and have a rendezvous, and we almost got nailed on that one. But on the way out, I described two trucks that were on the side of the road, troop trucks they were about a half a mile from the camp, and looked like they were headed in toward camp, but they were sitting stationary, and some of their troops were in the bush. So I don't know if they actually had intel and thought we were coming and they wanted to try and see if they could capture us or what, but they didn't get us going in, they didn't get us going out. But I can see that picture today just as clear as though it was minutes ago. That's the way I learn, and that's the way I operate. And that's why then when they called me in and basically tried to wipe my memory and give me a false memory, it more or less worked for a while, but my memory is too strong so that I would have flashbacks. I would see something and that would bring up that kind of like almost like a memory file. And then I would check names and everything. They would check out dates and times checked out to be right on. And then when I saw that spinning wheel where the black goes into the center, all of a sudden bunches of stuff start coming back. And I haven't spoke German for years, but I'm still fluent in it today.
Huh. Okay. All right. Anything else about Marilyn?
No, other than she was actually, she what really kind of tore her apart was her female problem, and then more or less she thought she had things going, and she felt like she was abandoned by John and Bobby, and then of course she didn't like some of the bad news about him or some of the inference about their so-called rendezvous, but it didn't bother her as much because it fed her ego as a woman. Her being desirable as a sex siren was as close as she could get to any kind of sexual satisfaction. So that was about it with her. She was a brilliant woman, and
Well,
she
there
paid the
are.
price.
Well, there's claims that she was possibly molested, sexually abused as a child when she was bouncing around from home to home, foster parent to foster parent. So, what you're alluding to is a possibility that she could have been damaged at such an early age, and because of the secrecy of that going on, that she wasn't taken to a physician or a doctor came to the house to look at her. She wasn't taken to the hospital, and probably developed some issues that prolonged in the rest of her life.
And that is very possible because I never really got too much into what her female problems were. However,
Sure.
if a guy had sex with her as a child and the guy's big, I mean, he could pretty much tear up her insides, and then they don't take her to a hospital. She could have all kinds of scar tissue in there and things growing together so that when somebody had sex with her, that comes apart. You got a lot of blood and a lot of pain. That would, something like that would fit what I knew
Right.
about what it was like for her if she had.
The narrative.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. What a tragic story.
Yeah. Yeah. She had a very, that
But,
psychologically,
her
emotionally.
legacy will live on.
Yeah. Yep. She paid a heavy duty price, and in actuality, she was very pro American, and I think she wanted to do things right. So, yeah, she was actually a very good person overall.
Right. Yeah. If she probably wore a sequin dress that was the American flag, that would be ingrained in everybody's image.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Wow. All right. Well, once again, you knocked it out of the park again with your information. Hopefully we've, let these people know. Next video we're going to do on MK Ultra. I don't know how
That's a
much.
biggie.
Well, I don't know how much you have prepared on that. So I want to take a break in between these videos
Yep.
when we go back to do that.
I know
But
Bunch is there. We had some arguments on that one.
right. Yeah. And the other topics that we were going to cover as well, J. Edgar Hoover,
That's
the
another biggie.
Warren Commission report, creation of the NSA, Roswell, the Church Commission, deep underground military bases, Bob Lazar, and cloning, just to top off a few. So we've got a
Yep.
lot to cover. Yeah, let's take a break. We'll come back and hit MK Ultra, which will be broadcast, if you're watching this video, on Thursday, December 31st, leading into the new year. So
There you go.
let me make sure I have that correct. I'm sure I do. Absolutely. Oh, no, I'm one page off. I'm at the end of my scheduler. I'm sorry. That's a Tuesday. So Tuesday, the 31st, that will be MK Ultra, the MK Ultra story with Noel Benoist. So look forward to that. And I don't have anything. Well, we'll do something again for the first of the year. Go to fearlessfloydshow.com and just scroll down on the homepage and you'll see all the upcoming videos. I'll update that this evening as well. And Noel, thank you for being here again. And of course, this video is coming out the day after Christmas. So everybody, have a safe and happy New Year, New Year's Eve. Let's go make America great again. All right.
Amen.
We'll
start the next year with truth.
There, truth and transparency. Hold on. Truth, transparency, and accountability.
There you go. And that's what we've got to have.
Yeah, three things. So, yeah, we need to do a show on that. All right. Well, thank you for being here, sir. And I'll catch you in a minute.
All righty.
And I am back. And that was, of course, the infamous, notorious Noel Benoist. And as you see, it'll be on topic, and all of a sudden he'll just take this right turn or left turn on you, and then go out in something that eventually will tie back in. But like, you're way out there, like he went from Marilyn Monroe to Vietnam because he was talking to you about his ability to have, I believe they call that a didactic memory, where you can see something and remember it just by image. So that's pretty cool. This is the day after Thanksgiving, so I don't have the special prepared, but look for it. I will probably do an intro or outro video for these. 12 Days of Christmas starts already, and if you haven't seen the banner, this is what it's going to look like. If you have somebody that's going through some type of immunity issues, which covers a broad spectrum of ailments, And please, if you have not yet, please go support Dr. Ed Roop. I will be back with Noel Benoist, the story of MK Ultra. Bet you can hardly wait for that one. So if you have not yet, please be sure